friends, thinkers, and gamers. Monday has come again. Welcome back to Tales of Praxis. I am your famously late host, Aaron Suduko, setting a new record, the founder of withaterriblefate.com, your first and final source for all literary studies, philosophical treatments, and celebrations of video games as works of storytelling, something that we've been working on for almost a decade in long-form written content, podcasts, convention and conference lectures, these live-streamed adventures, most recently on our Discord server, and most up-and-coming in my PhD studies, which will be kicking off this fall, working on a PhD in philosophy, which in no small part centers on my interest in the philosophy of video game storytelling. And I mentioned that tonight by way of extended apology because I alluded to this in the Twitch chat. I was a little more explicit about it in the Discord. So join the Discord if you want all the latest and greatest. But those who have been following Tales of Praxis know that one of the things that has been taking up a little bit of Aaron's bandwidth, more so than usual in the last little while, has been trying to figure out housing for this fall and beyond, moving to La La Land, the big, diverse, and hard to navigate city of LA, especially as an outsider and especially as one who is navigating the housing scene remotely. Hey, Grail, glad you made it. Sorry to have kept you waiting. So it has been complicated, to say the least, to figure out what's within budget and what makes sense for a place to live and actually to lock in a potential scenario. So haven't locked anything in yet. There's no cause for celebration just yet, but I did finally, after weeks of hitting walls with really unhelpful property managers and just not very promising apartment complexes, I found someone who manages a property close to campus who was very helpful, eager to connect with me, and made time right before our scheduled stream kickoff. And it ended up being a really good conversation that just extended because there was a lot to talk about and because I had already lost one potentially available apartment to another person sending in an application before me. I decided it would be worth it to avoid that by taking a few extra minutes to at least get an application in on the one that looked especially attractive to me before we started the stream. So a long walk to a short drink of water explaining why I am late, but thankfully, I know all of you well enough at this point to know that you will give me grace for that anyways. But just know it is all in service of being in a place where we can more squarely focus on these philosophical enterprises soon. And when it's locked in, we are definitely going to be enjoying some less interrupted and more sustained streaming adventures and all sorts of other content as well. So I'm looking forward to all of that with all of you. But we're here for now, and especially in light of our late start, I try not to belabor our kickoff. As I said last time, I'm working on putting together some supplemental materials grounding the way that I'm thinking about our current study and offering further discussion of it in the Discord. So I did that at the start of the week for this streamed study of ours as well. Go ahead and take a look. Invite you to join the Discord. That's going to be useful for just adding another dimension to this and making these stream kickoffs more efficient. If you're not sure what we're up to here, quite succinctly, this is Tales of Praxis. It's my endeavor as a philosopher of video game storytelling to go back to one of the series that shaped me into who I am and has done so for so many others as well over the almost 3 decades since it's been around. Bandai Namco's Tales of series of JRPGs. Work through all the games in quick succession and try to make sense of them intertextually in terms of what it is that they're trying to say, the stories they take us on, and the practical philosophy with which they equip us, not just to relate to their characters, but also to go forth into the broader world with new perspectives on ourselves and others, and most centrally, what it is to act and bring about the things that we value in the world. So we've been doing that in 2 formats. One, I can't do any better by way of representation than sharing the last instance of it with you. It's my long form traditional philosophical work, the last one being my longest form work in a while, the longest ever with the exception of Wittgenblade, the work that I published on Xenoblade Chronicles 3 and Wittgenstein, a study on Tales of Hearts R, making sense of its philosophy of art, and more specifically, the particular way in which its storytelling and world and metaphysics grounds and motivates and explains the emotional and spiritual and intellectual content with which we invest in the characters in these games and the community more broadly, and unify them into this whole that is greater than the sum of its parts and also so essentially characteristic of the Tales of series. And then the other half of the study you've already found. It's these live streamed book club adventures where we take deep granular dives into the Tales of games with each other in this real life JRPG format of the Twitch chat and yours truly. And we make sense of them collectively as the characters in these games do in their own parties, navigating the sometimes choppy, sometimes serene, always rewarding waters of their storytelling and their gameplay and what it is that they're saying to us and that we're saying to each other in real time. So that all started way back last year in March with a kickoff focused on the game that really made me into who I am as a person and philosopher and gamer, Tales of Symphonia, on the occasion of its remaster. And we have meandered our way through the series, not chronologically, but thematically, alighting most recently, very recently, as of last week, on Tales of Eternia, a game that I've been so excited to work through with all of you for months at this point, because I played it last year for the first time. I fell in love. And the further I have gotten into my analysis of the series and just thinking more about especially the mystic potential of video game storytelling quite generally, the more strongly I feel that this game really does have a lot of crucial things to say as an esoteric text in its own right, and also in terms of shedding light on the Tales of series more broadly. So I think like Tales of Hearts R, not enough Tales of fans have played it, but we're going to fix that. So especially if you're familiar with the series or you just love the philosophy of video games and you haven't played Tales of Eternia before, trying to make this as useful and rewarding an entree into it as possible. And hopefully one that can be lightly guided by my perspective as I try to work through my own thoughts on it in anticipation of something more involved that I'll probably write and publish on it down the line. So we're going to have a lot of fun. Hey, Padre, it's great to see you too. Sorry to be late, but excited to be here with you all now. The stream is titled, as Grail suggested, I guess maybe in a threatening way because it's not English, it's Latin. But, you know, especially rolling out of the American holiday, I'm not one for really diehard patriotism or even patriotism at all. But I figured it was good timing because it turns out the classic American motto perfectly fits with the theme for today. So I wouldn't have done it if not for the airtight synchronicity between that idea and what we're going to be working through. If you don't know, the American motto is traditionally, I think, e pluribus unum, out of many, one, which originally was in reference to the 13 colonies coming together to form a nation, but philosophically speaking is also this idea of diverse entities with their own perspectives and sovereignty and value uniting into this whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. And if you're on the Discord, and this is me bullying you again to join, if you're out there and have not joined, you will have read me speaking this morning about the various ways in which the Tales of series both explicitly and implicitly asks you to consider what it looks like and what it takes for different entities to actually synthesize from harmony with each other these broader wholes, these single units, these group agents, whether they're different minds inhabiting a single body or even a party, a group of people all coming together by virtue of the celebration of their diversity and harmonizing in service of a single goal, which they decide to pursue through this kind of group action. We're going to see as we get into this next stage of Tales of Eternia, it's going to ask us to consider that idea in many ways truly from the ground up, in terms of asking how can all the multitude of particulars of the universe come together to constitute these different wholes, these pillars, sometimes elemental, sometimes spiritual, sometimes emotional, that ground the different levels of existence. And then how can those higher level entities, in fact, harmonize with each other to create an even more powerful unity? We talked a little bit, in fact, during the Tales of Xillia duology about this idea of something as simple as a hierarchy of summon spirits, noticing, hey, it doesn't quite look like all of these spirits are created equal. How do we make sense of that? And how can we determine the dynamics between them? And we got some good traction on that, but we also realized maybe there's a certain level in the discourse in Tales of Xillia where that kind of explanation just falls out, and we don't get as much of an explicit analysis as we might like. Tales of Eternia, we're going to see, is on the opposite end of that. It asks us to focus quite directly on those ideas, and it gives us many, many handholds through which to adjudicate those concepts and actually derive some pretty powerful conclusions about how these many particulars are relating with one another to create these mystic harmonies. I'm really excited for you all to hear the podcast episode that I recorded with Dan this weekend to preview that a little bit. I was thinking a lot about things that we've been talking about on the stream for the last while as it happens. Topics such as the moral content of gaming, or the distance between players and avatars in gaming, with even a little bit of time left over for things like Shadow of the Erdtree. But suffice to say, this idea of games giving us this rich, multifaceted means of mystic exercise, which we often cannot get in other avenues of our life, is really looming large in my mind right now. And I tell Dan at the beginning of the podcast, I'm up on my high horse again, shaking my fist at people who I think are just missing the forest for the trees with a lot of game discourse these days, and asking sort of not the most interesting questions about things like morality in video games that I think just leave a lot of the interesting reasons that people sit down and play games on the table unanalyzed and uncelebrated. And I think our playthrough of Tales of Eternia can promise a powerful panacea to that. No pun intended, because it's also going to be rife with panacea bottles. But truly, I think this game is instructive and just as relevant nowadays as it was when it came out in 2000, if not more so, when we see the ways in which gaming has evolved since then. If you haven't caught our most recent podcast episode prior to the one that we just recorded, go ahead and take a look at that. And I'll also shout out, I am finally getting my act together, as I have perpetually promised for the last few weeks or more, and getting caught up on the VODs. Thank you again for your understanding, everyone, on that. But like I said, with the housing and with that Tales of Hearts R thing that I shared with you before this, please go and read that so it can be worthwhile. My attention has been split in a few places, but I think it's really important, especially now that we're off on this new standalone study of Eternia, for people who like to inhabit the YouTube sphere to have easy access to it. Pottery, I know that's a really easy means of access for you, and I know you're not the only one. So I still owe the YouTube community the Tales of Xillia and Tales of Xillia 2 VODs. Those have not been forgotten, but I also didn't want those to delay access to Tales of Eternia. So our first two kickoff studies are up on YouTube. I'm going to make it a habit of just keeping that engine running as we go forward here. So hopefully that will present a little bit less friction as we continue on in our study together. I feel like I had one more piece of housekeeping before we dive in. I mentioned it on the Discord, but something fun, which was new just as of today. My dear friend and colleague, the famous friend and colleague in the Twitch corner of the universe, Dan Hughes, is actually going to be coming to visit me for one last hurrah in Colorado before I move a week from today. And he's going to be staying throughout that week. So you know what it's like when the two of us get together. Game analytic shenanigans ensue. So we haven't planned a schedule or anything like that, but suffice to say, I would love for him to sit on Tales of Eternia. I know he would have a lot to say about that. We might also end up doing some one-offs like I did with my other dear friend and colleague, Matt McGill, when he came a little while ago. And I'm sure there'll be much more besides that. So at a minimum, get ready to say hi and chat. But more so, if you have particular ideas of things that would be fun to do together to make the most of that time, let me know. We can plan some stuff. It'll be a romp, an absolute romp. That's right, the one friend and colleague to end them all, Grail. He was the friend at the beginning, and he will declare the end of collegiality. There's something there. I was trying to do an alpha omega thing. It kind of got away from me. Can we even do Melnix on like regular keyboard formats? I didn't even think of that, but man, I'm really gonna have to steal that next time, Grail. It's the good thing though. We're still starting off this study, so we got time to play with it. I know pottery well, and I'll give a little shout out to you in the Discord once again with reference to Shadow of the Erdtree. So there you go. Since we're pumping it so much, it really is a wonderful community, as I've said before, but not on this stream. I've designed it really in the spirit of emulating the old school ancient Greek agora from which Western philosophy was in large part born. Just that kind of conversational format where you can just find someone else, talk about some aspect of gaming that's interesting to you, and unwind the philosophical implications. And really, I think part of why I wasn't champing at the bit to take a whole 2 hours to talk about Shadow of the Erdtree with Dan was, well, two things. First of all, I had the pleasure of co-oping at a decent amount with him when I was on my second run of it, because I'm a crazy person, and it was still on Dan's first run. So we talked through a bit of it just in real time as we were doing that. But also, it has been so rewarding to be able to work through the ins and outs of Shadow of the Erdtree with the Discord in a way that is just naturally played with and exposed and worked through thoughts pre-analytically before I've really wrapped my arms around exactly what I want to sit down and write a study about, because I'm sure I'll be doing that eventually, and I've already alluded to some things I might talk about in the Discord. But yeah, that opened a lot of the analytical valves that otherwise would have been way overpressurized when I got to talking with Dan. So don't worry, I'm sure we'll be talking about it more in time to come. But yeah, really more so because we were talking about games as mystic practice. We ended up talking more about the base game than Shadow of the Erdtree in this podcast. And I also felt like, it's still relatively new. It's easy enough to say spoiler alert, but I want to give people time to digest it more too. But believe me when I say I'm sure when he's here next week, if not before, we will have plenty more to talk about with respect to that. It's fun because actually way back in 2022, when Elden Ring came out for the first time, because yes, it was that long ago. God, I think it either came out right when Dan was visiting or he visited right afterwards, because I distinctly remember we had this great several week stint in Colorado before PAX East that year, when we just sat down, we wrote articles about Miyazaki side by side, which I think I've shared many times, but I'll share them again as I'm thinking about it, because they're both really, well, one of them is mine, so I won't toot my horn too much, but I think they're both studies that are worth your time. And then we went off after that and talked about Elden Ring in the context of Miyazaki's broader oeuvre at PAX East that year. So yeah, I think that's a long-winded way of saying Miyazaki just schedules his releases around our hang time and when it's momentous for us, because why else would he plan things in the way that he did? So one, of course, is my publication on Elden Ring, looking at it through the lens of making sense of the player's role in it and what it has to say about the nature of the player as an Elden god, an outer god, and also Miyazaki's perspective on storytelling and empowerment of the audience. And then Dan wrote this great article, which I have not had occasion to hawk in a while, but it is an article about a concept that he loves to use ever since his original time with Dark Souls, called the Gwyn moment. And I won't say too much about what that means in case people are listening or watching rather, and they haven't played the first Dark Souls. But put very succinctly, for Dan, it's that feeling of wandering through a game and not really knowing what it wants to say or what it's about or how to feel about your time within it. And then suddenly, usually at the end, there's this one moment, or even something as simple as a single line in a song that can make everything click for you and say, oh, I get it now, and I love that. And for him, that's the Gwen moment. And he wrote a really, really edifying article about that. So I encourage you all to check it out if you haven't. It's not as long as I was going to say some of our other stuff, but mostly my stuff. I'm the prime offender when it comes to very, very long and extensive studies. Good. Well, I said I wouldn't delay the start too much, and look at that. We had a little bit to talk about, but you will recall, here we are in Tales of Eternia. We finally achieved some level of communication with Meredy in a party context. Because remember, the player from the beginning of the game was actually in a position to understand Meredy even more so than Farah or Reed could. But with the help of the Or's earrings, the Craymels, those earrings, Marshall, and the emotional bond catalyzed in a moment of Meredy going off to save Kuiki, the party recognizing that, and then the party fearing for her safety, they actually got, I think it's safe to say, quite literally on the same wavelength with her, mediated by those Craymels. And so now, it's not as if everything is auto-translated and they're kept by default in sync with her. We've already seen that. There are really interesting moments where she slips back into Melnyx because their continuity of experience falls out of line with one another. And so their capacity to express themselves skews. But by and large, now she's able to express herself in a way that's intelligible to them and correspondingly is intelligible to us. What did we get from that? Well, we got the first explicit explanation on Meredy's account of what it is that she's up to, why it is that she came from Celestia to Inferia. There's this awful thing that might happen, ending in a boom, known as the Grand Fall, which seems to threaten Inferia and Celestia by bringing them closer and closer together. Maybe because of something going wrong with the Orbis barrier, we really don't know, but Keel is suspicious it has something to do with dark matter, which is holed up in there, and closer until boom. But Meredy also has a beat on what to do about that. Seek the Greater Craymels, and that was reaffirmed to us by Keel's former teacher, now a recluse, off in the village we visited last time in the treetops, the name of which I'm blanking on. Morlang, that was its name. And so he told them, go forth and look for the Greater Craymels. If you want to know more, you have to ask it of them, and you have to ask for their help. And if it's the right thing for them to do, they will do it for you. And so we've been directed to, I think it's called Undine's Stream, which is not far off, in hopes of finding a Greater Craymel there. I wonder who the Greater Craymel will be, what it will look like. But again, notice already, we're going from Craymels to Greater Craymels. We're getting an idea of something like hierarchy, that e pluribus unum. Keep that in mind. It'll be a nice way of schematizing what we see as we go forward. I also mentioned more than a few times, because I was anxious about it on Friday, that the game's, for me, first serious skill check is coming up. So you might notice, if you were watching last week, the characters are all a little bit beefier. That's because I actually took time to grind a little bit in anticipation of what's coming. So hopefully, even though the stream was very late, knock on wood, we won't be in a position of having the party fail and needing to retry things multiple times, as long as I can manage that. So we'll see how far we get, but we're already starting to get a little sense of the stakes. Even as Reed still wants to go home, we at least are now aware of some of the forces that are pulling him in other directions. How far they'll pull him and to what end remains to be seen. But if we keep our eyes peeled for that and the intersection of these different characters and forces and what it is that they're after, I think we'll get a lot of purchase out of the ideas that we've put on the table so far. I hope it's humorous in a fun way, Grail. I remember the last time that Dan visited, it was actually back when he was streaming Pokemon, and so we did some of that on his account, and one of his regulars said, oh man, this has a real teacher's lounge vibe, just these guys talking to each other. And I think that that's usually how we think of our time together too. We'll usually just pop on a show that we know really well in the background, it's usually Breaking Bad. And yeah, just sit on the couch. Evie's usually there too if we're doing it from my place, and just have our laptops and work on games and talk about them. Is that not the dream? That's the dream for me. So if you have a different dream, I hope you find a way of similarly fulfilling it through and with your friends. And whether or not it's your dream, I hope you know that by participating in this live book club study with me, you are part of how I fulfill that dream for myself. So, gotcha. Thanks for that. You're part of the community whether you like it or not. You can't say spirit. Remember what I said last week, Grail. Keep in mind, at this point in the series, they already have the nomenclature of spirits, and they went with something different. Keep that on the discussion board. Why is it that they changed the name? I do not think that's an idle question. I think that's important. I definitely got some more hours of expertise in with Farah, at least. And I got a few new arts, as we'll see, Grail, that sort of helped me to put together her combos a little better. Whether I remember that workflow is a different story, but as you know, we'll have some battles to get back into that. But yeah, we'll see. I was half thinking by the time we get to the skill check, maybe I'll switch back to Reed just to make sure it goes smoothly. But let's see. I'm feeling moderately confident with Farah, so I don't want to discount her out of hand. All right, friendos, we are fully stocked. We are so stocked from Aaron's grinding that we even have melange gels, almost a full set of them. So God help me, if we're not ready now, we might never be. Let's head to Undine's stream. Welcome back to Tales of Praxis, my friends. So nice to be here with you. And I hope you all had a great weekend, whether it was a long one for a holiday or just a regular one. I know some of the folks have been talking in the Discord about games that they've been playing or looking forward to playing, but yeah, let me know as we get back into the week how your weekend was, what's on your mind gaming-wise, what's on your hand in terms of what you've been gaming or what you're excited to work on next. 6 levels, man. Yep, 6 levels. And we were only at, level 15 before, so that is a substantial bump to our total level. And I still have a dark bottle on, so that tells you all you needed to know. I don't really think... I think, and Grail, I'm sure you can confirm this better than I, but just looking at the numbers I noticed while I was grinding, I think it's one of those Tales of games, like most of them, where as you reach higher levels, the enemies also yield less experience for you. So I don't think we'll get a lot more levels on our way to the next area, but that's, as long as we have the dark bottle, we might as well not waste it, right? So Eagle Dive was a big one for me with Farah. That's helpful. It's still a little hard for me right now to get her and enemies into the air and keep them there. I think maybe partly because I'm thinking about the way you can juggle enemies aerially in later games, and it might just not get to that level. But I didn't really play around with it back when I played Tales of Eternia for the first time, so that remains to be seen. But Eagle Dive helped, and then we also got Rising Dragon Strike, where she can like punch enemies into the air. So she definitely has some more options now. And it's great too, because while Reed has been in the background doing his own thing, I have clocked him opening up a lot of other really good skills. Like the wonderfully named, I think, Demon Lightning Hammer or something to that effect. We will eventually go back to playing Reed, I'm sure, and then you'll see that a lot of his skills I just love. They don't really show up elsewhere. They have really fun names. They're very arcadey in the way that I keep talking about. Well, there you go. Let's give that a try. I don't think I've tried that combo yet. Demon Lightning Hammer is the GOAT, especially early game.
Swallow dance. Swallow dance. Fireball.
Yeah, the hard thing about Rising Dragon Strike is that, as you can probably already see if you're paying attention, Farah has a bit of a wind-up to it, which makes sense. If you haven't noticed, Farah's attacks, it's great because you have this whole background of how she trained at this... it's not called a monastery, it's something else, right? dojo. She trained at this dojo in this particular fighting style of Regulus. And if you look, her attacks are really focused in large part on chi, the gathering of chi, basically storing energy within yourself and then discharging it in these focused bursts, which is how a lot of martial arts, in my layman's understanding of it, are actually oriented, and the disciplines and teachings that go with them focus on things like the channeling of chi. And so that's what it feels like using Rising Dragon Strike. She needs to take a moment to gather her chi before she can actually use it, which is great because it's really powerful, but bad because enemies can absolutely interrupt you while you're in the process of having her do that.
Let's do it.
But let's see if we can get that
Rising
combo
Dragon
off.
Strike.
No, you cannot combo those two, unfortunately, Gray.
Demon Lightning Hammer!
Swallow dance. Okay.
It is helpful, though, because I was looking at this when I was grinding, and I think they try to make it as easy as possible for you. Let me show you what I mean. If you look at her skill menu, there are actually some skills that say you can link the attack with other skills. You can see right now Palm Strike is one of those, and not all skills are like that. So I think if we look, and then it's just a matter of me figuring out how to implement these in the best like combo chains, we can probably get some good stuff going. So Palm Strike can be linked with other skills. Triple Blossom, it looks like, cannot. Swallow Dance doesn't have that text either. Let's see, Eagle Dive does. So it looks like the only ones we have so far that explicitly say they can be linked are Eagle Dive and Palm Strike. I'm sure we'll get more, and remember, we'll also get Sacred Skills, which have their own rules for comboing and make things a lot easier. But I think that's how the text wants us to think about Farah. Not all of her skills combo, but she's definitely, like, her fighting style centers on combos, so I think you want to prioritize those. That's what we're doing. It's a first-time study for so many, and a well-needed refresher for really both of us, even though I just played this a few months ago. But I've oversaturated my brain with other Tales of games in the intervening time. Undine Stream. I even remembered the name. How about that? This is another great track to put on your list of amazing Tales of Eternia OST.
Swallow dance. Go.
I don't know the best way to say this aesthetically, but we were talking a lot about these beautifully rendered fixed backgrounds of the kind that you see right now in the fight. And I kind of get the same sense from them that I get from the music tracks. And what I mean by that is they just seem to be so carefully and thoughtfully designed. Maybe with a bit of minimalism, maybe that's part of what it is, where they're not designed to overwhelm you with too much content or extraneous detail, but they very thoughtfully give a quite clear perspective on what an area is like. And so particularly when you get those visuals overlaid with those musical cues, I think that for me goes a long way towards giving Tales of Eternia a recognizable sense of place, which you don't always get from games that are, let's say, a little bit less thoughtful and delicate about how they represent their worlds. No, she doesn't. And isn't that a great thing to think about too, Grail? Because, yeah, let's look at her art. No, she doesn't look like she'd be an incredibly powerful fist fighter. And we are told really early on, speaking of games with great representation of and meditations on character, that is what other people think about her too. Like, remember when we spoke with those men who were trying to clear the rubble by the river on the way out of Rasheen's, they said after Farah left, wait, is she supposed to be a really strong fighter? She doesn't look like it at all. She's just a cute country girl, right? And that's worth keeping in mind with Farah. And I'm not going to say any more than that, but the idea that how she looks and presents might be different from how she actually is. or even her motives and the sources of energy she draws from, remembering that chi digression that we had a little while ago might be different from the facade that she presents as she goes about her day throughout the world. It's a good thing to keep in mind, I think, with Tales of characters quite broadly, but Farah is perhaps a foundational case of that, which is one of the many reasons that I'm so fond of her.
Let's do it. Hush. Ah. Eagle's palm strike.
Yeah, so see, that was a great tight chain from Eagle Strike into Palm Strike, or Eagle Dive, excuse me. So I think that's definitely what the descriptions of her skills are trying to express. Some are really strong single strikes, and some are designed to chain. So hopefully we'll get more of the chain in the offing. This is great. I also went back and equipped some of the items that we had gotten, but I had forgotten to equip, so you might have noticed, but Farah now has really great gloves, gauntlets, I'm not sure the right term for it, that can actually poison enemies on hit, which is a great thing, especially for this early game. Are you kidding me? A poison weapon? Yes, please. And I got into the habit too, which is a good one, like Grail was alluding to last week, of just if you trade off what you're focusing on with the character you're playing as, it can be a good way of just making sure that you're balancing their two different fight styles, assuming that you're playing as Farah or Reed, as you continue to fight through battles with them. So for instance, you'll see now on the screen, the punch level is higher. That's where my finger disappears. Punch level is higher, so what we're going to do is in these next few battles, going to prioritize normal attacks and skills that use her feet. And so that way the kicking level will go up, and then we'll pivot back to punch, and so on and so forth. I'll also note, Grail, so two things. One, I think lo-fi is a really great way stylistically of pointing to what I was referring to as minimalism. So I think you're totally right. And it's something that we've talked about before. Like, I haven't called out this series on With a Terrible Fate in a while. Sorry, I lost my voice today, so if my voice is gravelly and hoarse, I don't know why, but that's why. It's because I'm just hoarse, so I apologize for that if it's coming through. But another dear friend and colleague of mine, Max Skorinsky, quite a while ago at this point, he wrote this great series of articles studying Earthbound. So if you love that game, or even if you haven't played it and you want to know about a magical game out of time and of a different era of gaming, I encourage you to read those. But he wrote this great study on the music, because it's one of those older school games where even if you look at the amount of data it literally had to play with on a disc, it wasn't that much, certainly not by modern standards. And yet with that limited amount of encoding and the limitations of form, it virtually encoded an entire symphony with huge tonal range, and a soundtrack which is in many ways markedly more memorable than more modern music that has access to more data and instrumentation and things like that. Hey, Aaron, good to see you. Yeah, we're just vamping about Earthbound, so it's clearly one of those Mondays. But yeah, I love that. That's one of the many things to keep in mind and celebrate with these early games. The idea that because they are, as you say, Grail, lo-fi and just playing with fewer bits and bytes and whatever you want to call it, I think it called to the fore a different sort of auteur who really had something pointed to say quite succinctly, and oftentimes and quite subversively could say quite a lot by saying a little and just letting the implication hang in the air. That's something really important to keep in the forefront of your mind as we go forward in this, because remember, one of my core theses is that this game is deeply mystic and esoteric. And a huge part of that kind of practice is recognizing that the explicit text as such is the tip of the iceberg, and what you actually want to do with the text and what you ought to be guided to do in something like a mystic game is to actually discover a method for interpreting and excavating richer levels of meaning that are latent within those relatively few symbolic markings of text and musical notes and the like. So yeah, a very important thing to attend to and to celebrate with this form generally, this era of game, but also specifically with something like Tales of Eternia that has something to say with it. No, I'm not a horse. I'm not a... Why the long face? Other horse jokes. No, but scratchy throat for whatever reason. Aaron's half here. Well, making tea is always a good excuse, Aaron. Tell us what kind of tea you're making. That's the most important thing. That's right, keel content, the most important kind of content. Okay, good. Farah's health is lagging. I think that's because she's the healer and I keep just throwing her into the fray. Man, we suck at cooking this early in the game. That's too bad. I'm going to try not to suck up too many of our healing items, but we're going to need to use some as we go forward. Lemon and turmeric. It's a great mix. Well, I'm sorry that you sense sickness, but I hope that helps. Maybe you've contracted my same scratchy throat from afar. Alright, I'm going to try to solve this problem preemptively by actually using Farah as a healer more. Yeah, that combo is great because you pounce on an enemy and then you knock them out of the way, which gives Farah a lot of space to just manage the enemy and herself, whether she needs to heal or go in with a different attack strategy or something like that. But I'm reminding myself we were going to focus on her feet. So let's do that in the next few battles.
Let's do it. Swallow dance.
Demon lightning hammer.
The good thing is, look at this. I took in so much grinding that a lot of these enemies are literally just hitting for 1 damage point. I'm not a crazy person, I swear. I just play one in real life. Yeah, I heard it. I was just going to let it go, but I should have known better with you around, Grail. You know what I mean. I finally sucked it up this weekend and decided to get back into running, which was long overdue. And it has me on a jag of thinking about also getting back into making like post-run smoothies. And so when you talk about things like lemon and turmeric, it's funny timing because my folks long ago gave me like a recipe book for different smoothies, and a lot of them have ingredients like that in there. There you go, foot up. That's the dream. Yeah, good excuse to break out my blender again before I pack everything up and move away. Good, so now they're nice and even. So I think we can focus on punch, but it's really 6 of 1. There we go. So notice, I'm going to point this out now, and then you'll see it much more obviously in some of the later dungeons. It's something that, again, is very much of this era of game, and something that I love about this era of game, which you really don't see as much in modern game design language. I think just because, like we've been talking about, there's less of the fixed point camera and preset backgrounds, so you can't really achieve the same kind of navigational puzzle. But if you notice, and we might get interrupted by a monster, so that's why I'm talking at a still frame before we move too much, but to get over to this chest, I actually had to give a decent amount of play to the controls to figure out, okay, what's the exact way to get over there? Like, what can we actually navigate through, and what's an obstacle? Because there's a path underneath this brush that we have obstructing our view from afar because we're looking down on the scene from the player's bird's eye view. And so a lot of these dungeons mess with perspective and ask you to think about what is outside your point of view but accessible to the characters. So I'll say two things. First, like I mentioned before, and I will continue to mention, this came out the same year as Final Fantasy IX, which does a ton with that idea of playing with navigational perspective, but more so from the attitude of theatrical performance, because so much of Final Fantasy IX, I would say all of Final Fantasy IX, is self-consciously concerned with theatrical form and content, whereas here, remember, our guiding light is the mystic experience and the question of what it is to understand our perspective and inhabit the perspective of the other. And so keep in mind those navigational puzzles and the fact that the game is actually asking you to negotiate the gulf between what it is that you as the player are seeing and what it is that Farah would be able to see from her line of sight down there on the screen. I guess over there on the screen, since you're looking at me on the overlay as opposed to me pointing at my monitor. Because that mechanic is itself reinforcing this core theme that I want us to keep coming back to over the course of this study. Oh, that's a loaded question. Do I have any final thoughts on Colorado? Look, this is my very political answer. I think if you have good reasons for going to any particular place, and really think about what the place can give you and why you want to be spending time there, and you can be at peace with that, you can find value in any place. I came to Colorado for what I will confess any day of the week were a bad set of reasons. Not to say that I regret it, but just that it is not a place that really agrees with me, in large part because of how it is that I ended up here. Also, I grew up on both coasts, so I very frequently find myself missing having access to an ocean in one way or another. But I will say, if you love things like anything to do with mountains, the best mountains here for things like skiing, hiking, mountain climbing, if you love biking, if you love dogs, if you love craft beer, if you love the forced athleticism that comes from living at high altitude and so just needing to develop better cardiovascular efficiency than you would have anywhere else in the world. If you like people who are maybe a little holier than thou about things like their tech careers or how fit they are, that's not to say everyone in Colorado is like that, but I think the stereotype holds true with some folks. There are a lot of great things about it. The outdoorsiness and a lot of just the craft scene, even beyond like alcohols, that extends to just sort of how they think about things like local business and things like that. So it's fine. I think all states can be fine. But it's not one that I would recommend to myself doing a longer stint in, just because it's not one that agrees with me.
Let's do it. Ha.
I think the other thing that's hard, and maybe this is unfair, but I don't think it is, I'm a huge foodie, as I think we've had occasion to talk about before on the stream, because I'm always talking about food in one way or another. And Colorado, not really a big food scene. I mean, they have some restaurants that are great, don't get me wrong, but being kind of landlocked as it is, you're not going to get good seafood, and there's not really a lot of other local fare of any particular cuisine persuasion beyond that. There we go. I was having trouble healing with Farah.
That was close.
In the area I'm in, like middle of nowhere, small town, it's really mostly fast food around me, which has not been great for me either. There are a few restaurants, and I think they're getting in some more restaurants, which are nice, but it's not like it will be living in Los Angeles, for instance, where you can't throw a rock without hitting like a really amazing restaurant of one persuasion or another. Yeah, but like I said, I would also be the first to consider myself self-consciously biased just because of how I ended up here. So don't take me as saying don't come to Colorado. I have more than a few friends who have used my residency here as an excuse to come and visit, and we've had lots of fun doing things like exploring nature, going to local spots. It's a nice place to visit. And if you have good reasons for living here, I'm sure it can be a nice place to live too. I didn't. Yeah, well, it's America, Pottery. There are also going to be a lot of cars most places. I'm just hopeful. What I've heard about LA, and I'm not going to say too much about this because I don't want to be jinxing myself or shooting myself in the foot, is it's funny. You can look up stats on this. Colorado is like one of the top states for percentage of car drivers who own pickup trucks. And so many of the cars are trucks that are just so loud and have terrible emissions. And even just on my street, like it's a street with 2 speed bumps that people will speed down, and I'll just hear them ripping their stupid engines at all hours of the night. And I hear LA, for all its traffic, tends to have more of like electric cars and just lower key cars. So I'm hoping that's true. We'll see whether or not that's borne out. I haven't spent a lot of time in the city yet, but you'll definitely get my input because, like I said, the streaming is certainly not going to stop. If anything, it will only grow. So you'll get the play-by-play. I have no doubt about that. Yeah, it is true. I mean, you need a car to get around in Colorado, unfortunately. Lots of people have bikes as well, but if you're going anywhere, you really need a car. Cars, I guess, also help a lot in LA for all the public transportation, unfortunately. Yeah, it is unfortunate.
Let's do it. Toe. Swallow dance. Ha. Toe. Palm strike. Toe. Toe. Ha. Ah. Toe. Toe.
Wind wave.
Ha. Swallow dance. Ha. Ah. Ha.
Demon lightning hammer.
All right, get into the habit of healing. Oh, well, the fight ended before I could do that, but I'm going to work on that.
You have done well.
Who could that be?
You have done well to come this far.
This is...
Could it be?
Yeah, it's true. The starfish didn't start taking hardcore starfish steroids until after this. Ah, that's so fun. I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, it's like they're totally different enemies in the later games. Oh, man, I almost choked with my excitement because I forgot to mention this. I had half a thought earlier and I forgot to finish it. So we were talking about minimalism in this era of gaming, and Grail, you were saying this feels like something that is quite particular to the early games in the Tales series. And I feel what you're saying there, but it's actually, this is what reminded me of it, was you mentioning the starfish. Always remember what we have been saying from the beginning of this study, that I think Tales of Eternia shares some quite interesting and revealing DNA with Tales of Grace's F. And don't forget, one of the things that we discussed more than once in Tales of Grace's F was the level of something like a lo-fi minimalist sort of intimacy, whether that was something like the simple and quite pointed piano tracks that Sakuraba uses in a lot of the different scoring in the game, or even, I would say, the similarly pared down and intimate relationships between the characters that ground a lot of the story. So that it's worth thinking about too, how even things that might seem like an artifact of the earlier games also have this broader thematic utility that have come back in different warranted cases later in the series, depending on the particular content of the series. Yeah, Pottery, stay tuned, but Grail is right on the mark. I mean, there's a lot that found its home and origin in Eternia, including gameplay-wise. Right off the top of the head, I think the most obvious and cool one, Mystic Arts. But yeah, a lot of stuff that is as memorable and now central as that. Eternia really launched a lot of ships later in the series.
It has been a long time since I last saw a human.
The Greater Craymel, Undine?
Okay, they do say Undine.
Whew. It's the real thing?
Greater Craymel Undine. Keeper of the holy waters, forgive us for treading upon this land.
Holy waters.
Oh, Greater Craymel Undine, please tell us.
Also notice, Undine is a bunch of bubbles? What?
Is it true that the Grand Fall will come to this world?
Merity is really interested in the bubbles.
Do you think a greater Craymel such as I would deign to converse with humans without reason?
Then it is true.
Whee!
Let me ask you then, what are your desires?
I want you to go in here.
Short, sweet, and to the point.
To save the world, we need the Greater Craymels' power. Won't you help us?
I understand how rude this request must seem, but there is no other way.
In that case, I shall see if your actions speak as loud as your words.
A test.
This is where the Craymels sleep. If you are prepared, venture further within.
Where the Craymels sleep.
If you're prepared, Keel, what does she mean? She wants us to fight her. Fight? She's a Greater Craymel. We can't win. Undine, she's testing our power. We've got to give it our all.
I'm going to keep pointing at... So, again, I know I said a lot of this on Friday, but I do have deeper thoughts as to why the voice acting is quite cool and merited, given the story that this game is telling and how it's telling it. But I'll also keep pointing out lines that just strike me as great line readings, simpliciter. And the line that it's just because Keel is always on my mind. But Reed just had another line like that, and we should look up the name of his voice actor, because I think he does just do a great job with a lot of this. But the way he just had this almost snark in his voice of how ludicrous this idea was, like, we're going to fight a Greater Craymel? There's no way we can win. He gets a lot of range into these little lines, and that is worth shouting out and appreciating as we go on here.
Yeah, nothing ventured, nothing gained. No problem.
See? Yes, exactly what I'm saying, Grail. Thank you. I'll also point out, so Farah had that line saying, we want to save the world, and to do that we need the help of the Greater Craymels. Remember, they don't really know whether or why that's true yet. They just have Merity's say-so to go on, because Merity seems to think that that will work, and the affirmation of Keel's former teacher that it's going to be worth talking to the Greater Craymels. In a very early video game, you might think, well, okay, it's a simple story that just gave us some premise of go forth and save the world, and you're not really supposed to think about it that much, and the characters aren't going to think about it that much either. I'm going to spoil a little bit just in terms of, letting you know that this is a Tales of game. The earlier games were very much concerned with the character's relationship with their quest and thinking through why it is that they're doing what they're doing and whether that is worthwhile. That's not something that just came to the later games. So as simple as this seems right off the bat, we should find ourselves wondering, okay, is there more to it? Why is it that they're just going along with it? What might end up being revealed about the implications of this journey. But it's fun because I think especially in this earlier era, it's easy to write that off as something that is maybe just too cookie cutter simple. And if we weren't playing it in this context, that might actually lead you to, pick it up if you were getting it at a secondhand store or something and didn't know anything about the Tales of series and say, oh, this is kind of a generic JRPG, whatever, I'm not going to bother with it. But in the context of this study and me telling you, and also us just knowing as Tales of fans, that, like we were saying about facade versus inner content earlier in the stream, is similarly just the tip of the iceberg. And seeing what is beneath the surface is going to be a hell of a lot of fun. Yeah, you got it, Pottery, exactly. But fine, Nietzsche, tell me, if God is dead, what disease did he die of? And why didst he not have antibodies? Kevin Miller, Thank you, Grail. Oh, and he was Sly Cooper, too. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Kevin Miller. All right, I'm going to keep saying that a lot because I want to burn his name into my head. Because I think he does give a worthy and cool performance in this, especially as we get further into it and see more of the various tonal palettes he draws from.
Eagle dive! Ha! Toe!
Demon lightning hammer! Fireball!
Ha! Rain! Ha! Toe!
Fireball!
Toe! Ha! Ah! Toe! Ha!
Fireball! We did it!
Grail, you really unlocked something for me last week when you pointed out what a snot-nosed kid Keel sounds like when he shouts out Fireball. And again, I think that says a lot about his character. That doesn't strike me as a shortcoming of the voice acting either. That seems pitch perfect for who Keel is at this moment in the story. Oh, we need to go up for that and then... Yeah, it's a loop around. Just talking to myself, remembering the topology here.
Let's do it!
Topography? No, topography, not topology.
Toe!
Aqua Edge!
Ice needle! Ha!
Building the muscle.
Ha! Ah!
The healing muscle.
Toe! Eagle dive! Ha! Rising dragon strike! Ha! Ha! Ah!
Fireball!
Ah! Ah! Ah!
Come on, get to the other side. Come on,
Blade!
run!
Ah!
Why are you so bad?
Wind blade! Wind blade!
Ha! Ha!
Aqua Edge!
Toe! Ha! Don't take me lightly.
It's a result of the story having a powerful and subversive vision for how the voices were to be used. And I don't care whether that was intentional, but in terms of it being the effect, I am perfectly willing to die on that hill. And I think the fact that, as you say, the VAs did many other worthy things is only a testament to the truth of that. Apple Shield, my love. A mystical apple-shaped shield. There you go, folks. I know you didn't believe me before, but now you have an item description to prove it to you, all the Miyazaki heads in the audience. It's a mystic game, because they used the word mystic in the shield description. Mystical, but, you know, potato, potato. I think that's a worthy trade.
Let's do it. Ha!
Not the attack of the starfish. I gotta focus on healing. I also, it still seems like I can't do Farah's healing spells outside of battle, so I'm gonna try to heal up the party now.
Ha! Ice needle!
Wind blade! Demon lightning hammer!
Toe! Ha!
Wind blade!
Ha! Toe! Ha!
I feel like sometimes when I try to target the other party members with healer, it doesn't take for some
We
reason.
won!
That seemed to shake out eventually. Last one. Oh, I checked that one already. Stupid Aaron. Because I'm just overburdened with all these great items. I think I want to use... Oh, no, I think I can cook. That's a much better solution. Ugh, I don't have tomatoes. And, bummer of all bummers, the food shop in Morlaix doesn't sell tomatoes. That's why we can't make salads. Oh, so that's nice. So it does have the gate that if the party eats and it's successful, they're full and they can't eat. But if you fail to cook a dish, it doesn't count as eating, which stands to reason. So then you can try to cook again, presuming you have the ingredients. So it's really just burning ingredients. Good to know. Okay, I feel okay about that. I feel okay about that. I might top off hit points anyways. I'm not nervous, you're nervous. Maybe I'll have to do an Eternia-focused review of him. I don't talk about voice acting a lot. One of the first articles I wrote, actually, just because I felt like I had to say something about it when it happened back in undergrad, was when Nimoy passed away. I tried to write out and make sense of what I felt his voice acting gave to Kingdom Hearts, because I love his performance as Xehanort in that. Yeah, well, I love voice acting so much, I find that it usually isn't the most obvious point of intersection with my philosophical work on gaming. But I'd like to find a way to change that eventually, because we do have such fun analyzing the different performances of people, and they add so much to it. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, you're full of interesting typos today, Grail. One of those days, I guess. Yeah, if he did give an interview about Eternia and you find it, please do share it with the Tales of Praxis channel or elsewhere, because I'd be really curious about that. Okay, I'm going to be a big, brave boy and stay with Farah, even though I'm still learning her. And we'll see how this goes. And if it doesn't go, I apologize in advance, but we will definitely get through it tonight, and we'll have plenty to talk about either way. So, with that, I half pointed this out, but before we go and see what's next, notice how cool it was at that midpoint in the stream, not only to converse with Undine before you had reached the heart of the stream, but also basically to be conversing with her. It's implicit there, but it'll become clearer in a moment. Conversing with her in this kind of hive mind format, where she was manifesting, but she was manifesting as the sum of all these bubbles, which were themselves just water Craymels. So again, out of many, one. We're already seeing that in terms of how Greater Craymels are constituted by myriad lesser ordinary Craymels, seeing that hierarchical order of things and metaphysical levels in the universe and minds. Something else worth keeping in mind, remember, water has a special role in this world. Water Craymels are the distinguishing feature of living things. So it is probably not coincidental, and probably worth thinking about as we go forward, that this journey to engage the Greater Craymels kicks off with the Greater Craymel of Water. Yeah, send it to the channel, Grail, please. Notice also, we already talked about this a bit when we met Keel, but I contend it is very interesting and worthwhile to consider when Eternia trades back and forth between voiced and unvoiced aspects of the story, especially when they're both within main content, but even more broadly than that. So we just went from a fully voiced conversation with Undine now to the heart of the stream, and it's not voiced anymore. I assume you are here because you are ready to fight me. There is no turning back. The Craymels are coalescing into a body for Undine. We're ready. Well, Farah's confident. I'm going to believe in the Farah who believes in me. Ready. How about you, Keel? I'm ready. Always the picture of confidence, that boy. Very well. Let us begin. Buckle up. I'm not scared. You're scared. Oh my god. How do we... There we go. That's all I wanted to do. So the trick here, and you can see me fumbling with this already because I didn't practice it enough, even though I did practice it. You want to use the jump command that I was alluding to before, and this was the only time in the game that I had to use it, but that's how you get around her spear attack that will otherwise just waste your party.
Fireball! Sonic Fist! Fireball! Swallow Dance!
Yeah, I think we might be over-leveled enough to just knock her out. We have spectacles, so we might as well use them. Yeah, we're gonna be fine.
Swallow dance.
Keep missing the timing on that.
Wind blade!
It does seem like, I don't remember this happening the first time I did it, but if Farrah's in the front, she seems to kind of just be eating the spear, and no one else gets it, which, not ideal, but... Or not. Come on! It's harder to hit the timing of that than I want it to be. The song does indeed go hard.
You can't hide. You can't hide. You can't hide.
Stop spamming your stupid move.
You can't hide.
Wind blade!
You can't hide.
Yeah, so the annoying thing about spectacles in this game, which are the precursor to magic lenses, obviously, is that every time you want to check an enemy's HP, you have to use another one. It doesn't just stay as revealed.
Aqua edge.
Sonic blade!
Could you, like, be within my hitbox? I'm really suffering from not using Reed right now because Farrah, like, her punches won't reach.
Sonic.
Wind blade!
Swallow dance.
There we go. Alright. That was a little gross, but we made it. You work together well. I will help you. Thank you. However, I am merely one of the primary Craymels of Inferia. That is a new term. Primary Craymel. And notice it is indexed to Inferia. Not just one of the primary Craymels, but one of the primary Craymels of Inferia. She's merely one of them. In order to achieve your goal, you need all of the Greater Craymels. That is not indexed to anything. She's saying you need all of them. Period. All of the Greater Craymels. Where are the other Greater Craymels? I will now enter the Craymel cage. Delightfully esoteric. I'm going to tell you half of an answer. You gotta figure the other half out. Goodbye. Please wait. Tell us where to find the other Greater Craymels. Undine, in the Craymel cage. Let me see, Meredy. You bet. Here we go. The Craymel cage. Those who were paying attention on the main menu might have noticed this was the one area that was grayed out. So now we have access to something new. Check the status of Craymels and interchange Craymels, or use items on Craymels, or fringe. Something which is blinking and yet which has not been explained to us yet. A new Craymel art may form. However, the vitality of the Craymels will be averaged. Interesting. Getting exposure to something that is self-evidently important with no background on what it actually is. So we can interchange the Craymel, and it seems to be attached to spread. So we're switching it back and forth between Meredy and Keel, it looks like, because we know they each have a cage. Looks like we can also use items on Undine. I don't think we can use the wind shard. We might be able to... No, we can't use the snow shard either. Each Greater Craymel has basic Craymel arts, so if you select the Fringe command, you can learn it. Oh yes, so we have to actually hit Fringe to learn the art in the first place. So now Meredy can use Spread, because she's the one carrying Undine. Yes, it's true, Grail. That is a much more precise way of explaining the problem that I had, was that Undine had that wonderful aqueous super armor, which I think was even more of a pain for Pharaoh with her fists and feet than for Reed, since he has a little more reach. But we made it. We did try the Craymel command, Marini. What does the vitality gauge mean? It shows how much energy the Greater Craymel has. Undine is the Greater Craymel of Water, so if you use water arts, her vitality goes up. What happens when the gauge is full? You can summon the Greater Craymel itself. Wow, that's incredible. I can't wait to see. During battle, if Vitality Maximum is displayed and Max is displayed under character status, you can select the summon skills of Craymels, whose Vitality is at maximum. So this is very cool. Notice, it is not like something like Tales of Fantasia, where you just get summon commands that are the equivalent of any old spell and you can use it anytime. Nor is it quite like Tales of Symphonia, where you have this whole over limit mechanic and Sheena can summon spirits but only while she's in over limit. Instead, it's something that's tied quite directly to the elemental basis of the Greater Craymel. And so what they were saying, and you'll see this as we go through the game, is that basically, in a similar way to what you got in, I don't have it sitting on my desk anymore, but in a similar way to what you got in Tales of Destiny right before this with the Swordians, these swords that are also characters that have everything from experience points to arts they can learn to things that they express in cutscenes. So too, in Tales of Eternia, are Greater Craymels basically characters who are involved in the story, also an essential part of the world, and can develop their capacity based on how much not only you use them in battle, but also you use the elements that correspond to them. And so we'll see as we get through this, and it actually ends up being quite important for some of the post-game stuff, the degree to which you invest in this, the more you get in the habit of engaging with the aligned Craymels and summoning the Greater Craymel, the stronger they actually become according to their level. And in fact, their abilities in battle evolve in very cool ways. So I said it at the start of Tales of Eternia. I'll say it again now that we're seeing a bit of this system, especially if you're interested in how spirits are represented in the Tales of games, both with respect to gameplay and how they constitute the world and the plot lines that the characters engage with. Tales of Eternia is a really cool and precise source code with respect to, but also deviation from many of the formats for that which we see in the other games. Yeah, thank you, Grail, and that's a great corollary worth pointing out before we leave here. Yeah, take a minute to appreciate where we found Undine. I will let you know, with a mild spoiler warning, I guess, this is very much the rule rather than the exception. As we just saw, Greater Craymels are constituted as basically an emergent entity that sums out of a bunch of lesser elemental beings. So too is the place where they manifest just this natural haven and bastion for the element of which they're constituted and over which they preside. So yes, of course you're going to find Undine at this magnificent, pure, in Keel's words, holy stream. It's spiritual and mystical exactly because it shows this harmony between the deity that is tethered to a particular element and representative of a particular element, and the entirely mundane, profane experience of that element in nature. Yeah, and that's what I'm pointing to also, Pottery. Yeah, notice when we're talking about the deity, or the spirit, if you prefer, emerging out of nature, it's something that comes quite first personally from how we are engaging with nature. Remember, that's something that already came up in terms of the difference between theory and praxis, and Keel, the academic, hold off in an observatory versus Keel, the adventurer, going out into the world to gather data and actually see things with his own eyes. And keep that in mind, because we've also already seen this is a world with a religious backbone and framework. Don't forget about Seifert. You're not going to forget about Seifert. We'll see Seifert again soon, but there's this whole religion built up around Seifert. So this is not a world that exists sans religion, but now that we're getting to know more about Craymels and the Greater Craymels, it's something which seems to be giving us something like maybe the religious feeling, at least the mystic feeling, completely unmediated by any sort of religious semiotics. In fact, remember, the person who guided us here was an ex-academic who said, if you want the help of the Greater Craymels, the thing that you need to do is go and meet with them yourselves. Because the only way you're going to engage with them is by going and talking with them directly. And that alone signifies the exact difference that I have in mind.
Let's do it. Toe, swallow dance.
I feel like knowing that it's you, Aaron, you need to specify. Are you talking about human or cat? Both would be acceptable.
Toe, toe, wind blade.
Evie likes Keel too, for what it's worth. She's my roommate.
Toe, toe,
Human, okay.
toe.
Demon lightning hammer! Oh,
He's a really cool character. And I'll tell you, because I mean, I didn't know for sure I'd be going off to this PhD program the first time I played it, and now getting actively ready to re-enter academia, his character really hits for me, because you don't get that kind of model of a scholar wrestling with the nature of scholarship in any other Tales game I can think of off the top of my head, at least, but I'm willing to be corrected about that. Yeah, really interesting, I think, for those of us who have a scholarly bent to our characters. And I would venture to say that applies to all of us to one degree or another, being here and with a terrible fate as we are. That's right, the pure Keelian aura. This place looks safe, and the air seems really nice. And notice that too, they can even just intuitively sense the attitude of nature and that aptness for a harmonization with it. Yeah, what about it? Well, some of us can sense it. Maybe not Reed. Why don't we take a little break here? That doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Hey, Keel, how many Greater Craymels are there?
I'm not quite sure, but it's said that there are generally 4 main types. Water, fire, and wind, the 3 basic Craymels, and the light Craymel, which unifies them all.
Interesting. And notice, especially if you're someone who has either played other Tales of games or simply played other elementally oriented JRPGs, that seems to be a weirdly arbitrary collection of elements. Water, fire, and wind, which are unified by light.
And where are the other Greater Craymels besides Undine?
Undine didn't tell us.
The planes of existence for humans and Craymels differ. Just for them to appear in front of humans is an extraordinary event.
I mentioned this the last time it came up, but bear in mind, it's not just Aaron applying different interpretive levels to this game. This is a game that is explicitly concerned with planes of existence and what it is to negotiate them as different kinds of being, whether you're a human or a Craymel or maybe even something else. A different order of Craymel, perhaps.
Wow. Really?
Hey, for our next destination, why don't we head for Inferior?
Inferior? You mean the king's castle?
Yeah, gathering all the Craymels is way beyond our abilities. There isn't much more we can do other than inform the king about the Grand Fall. Am I wrong?
And then I can finally go home. I'm Reed and I hate when things change. That's my thing.
But we established a pact with Undine all on our own.
That was just plain luck. We can't afford any mistakes. We've got to know our limits.
If you look up antonyms for limit break in the dictionary, you will find a picture of Reed Herschel.
That's true. We do have an obligation to report this to the king.
Keel?
Imagine the consequences of seeking the Greater Craymels without the king's permission. We might attract needless suspicion.
I see your point.
It's decided then. Our next destination is Inferior City.
Oh, thank God. I can't wait to go back to bed.
What
Said
about
Reed.
the Greater Craymels?
Don't worry. Once the king learns of the Grand Fall, he'll mobilize the army and find all the Greater Craymels.
Meredy, have faith in our king, okay?
Meredy, I know you're new to this world, but listen, here's the one thing you need to know about this world. The thing about kings in this world, you can always trust kings to do the right thing. You have to go through the Forest of Temptation to get to Inferior City. Nothing ever goes wrong in the Forest of Temptation. Go southeast along the river. It's across the bridge. And I think we might just recuperate and restock in the village along the way. That's okay. Okay, King Gaius, the exception that proves the rule. I'll allow it. It's a good call out.
Let's do it. Go. Ah. Go. Here. Sonic Fist. Go. Go. Swallow Dance. Ha. Go.
I feel a certain kind of way about it too, Grail, but
Don't let your guard down.
having worked through it pretty recently and then also watched Dan play through it when he tried the beginning of Eternia over the winter holidays, I am somewhat confident it won't be that much of a chore for us. And for those who don't know what Grail and I are talking about, I will say, hey, do you remember when I was talking about the early Tales of games being concerned with puzzle solving in their dungeon structure in a way that isn't quite the same as later games? The Forest of Temptation is a great early game case study of what that looks like. And that's all I'm going to say about it. You'll see what I mean shortly.
Okay.
Drag, I missed a chest. Now it wants us to get it on the other side. Alright, bear with me. There might be something worthwhile in it.
Let's do it. Swallow Dance. Ha.
Demon Lightning Hammer!
And I will say, a cool thing about the battles in Tales of Eternia, if you haven't picked up on this yet, is that even though we are now, for the moment, over-leveled and not getting that much experience from these fights, the battles still remain, in a relatively even-handed way, worthwhile because you still get to develop the levels of competency with the characters' different fighting styles. So Farah still uses fist and kick attacks, and she continues to accumulate points that let her get to higher levels and access new arts. So it rewards you continuing to invest in fights even in lower level areas when you have kind of leveled out of them. I think that's going to be what I want to give Farah, but I want to look more granularly. Yeah, it's just slightly better defense. That's fine. Good. I think that's all I missed.
Let's do it. Swallow Dance. Ha. Go. Eagle Dive. Ha. Go.
Good, so what I'm going to do... maybe it's not worth doing here. Usually, the rhythm I got into later in the game is when you start playing with a decent number of Craymels, it's pretty easy and rewarding to set them to shortcuts, and then you can just trigger them automatically without having to go into the menu. But for now, I think we can just do it like this. Can we get her off before the battle ends? Nope.
That should do.
But there you go. So if you noticed, the little sprite that showed up, Undine herself leveled up. And that was from Meredy using spread a lot. In fact, okay, yeah, now the workflow is all coming back to me. So what you want to do, you don't need to worry that much about the shortcut for summoning, but This becomes more important later, but I can show you now. If you are not controlling a mage, you can still shortcut them to use the relevant Craymel arts for a particular Craymel in order to accelerate the level up process and make the Craymel, the Greater Craymel that is more powerful. Which is cool because, again, like we were talking about with respect to these systems in Eternia last week, it's not like it's an overly simplistic system, but for me, I just feel like it has just the right level of sophistication where it feels intuitive. Maybe it's also part of how the world quite rigorously and logically explains the basis for the system. Like, okay, this is what Craymels are. This is how Greater Craymels emerge from them. This is how we're able to engage with the Craymels. And so I can base the actions that I take with respect to the system out of reasons that actually touch the nature of the world and what it is the characters are up to. As I say it, that's probably a big part of what it is for me. But yes, it's a rewarding system for me to actually get into and feel like I'm getting everything I want out of it, rather than just saying, oh, this is too much for me to bother with. And so I'm just gonna hope that characters sometimes summon the Greater Craymels on their own. I'll just use a Panacebo. Easier.
Swallow dance. Fireball. Okay.
That was easy.
There we go. One more I missed.
Let's do it.
All these loops and roundabouts, I tells you.
Sonic fist.
Wind wave.
I want to check quickly where are accounts. Trying to also make sure we're doing a decent job of distributing the art counts so that we don't gate ourselves out of higher level arts just by not using the lower level art enough.
Super lightning blade.
Oh, Rita's Super Lightning Blade now. We're set. We don't need to worry about any more battles. He has Lightning Blade and Super Lightning Blade. That's the whole ball game. Feather Robe. Good. Oh, is it actually worse than what Keel has right now? Talk about a fool's errand. Oh, no. Yeah, see, I think that's an okay trade-off. And there you go. He wasn't even fully equipped. Now we're good. Oh, we've gotten some new equipment without my realizing it. That's good. I'm gonna maybe give Farah the mental bracelet, and I feel like Merity usually ends up being the glass cannon. Let's do that. Lightning everything, I'm telling you, it's the best. Have you heard of a guy by the name of Core Meteor? Let me tell you about him in vivid, unflinching detail.
Do it. Ha. Rising Dragon Strike.
Of course, as soon as I take the poison charm off of Farah, she gets poisoned. Just to ruin my life.
Demon hammer. Fireball.
We won!
Well, we can't get out of this stream a moment too soon, folks. But hey, Vini Vidi Vici, or whatever the the Latin is. We came, we saw, we conquered. We did our job. Yes. Stick around, Pottery. You'll have that reaction to more than a few of the arts. The animations, like everything here in Tales of Eternia, are off the chain, and it only gets off the chainier as we continue to develop in the story. Telling you, it's the arcadiness of it. This game just goes off. It doesn't want to interrupt anything. Okay, yeah, I am going to go back to town first real quick. And then we will away to the Forest of Temptation. And my guess, knowing that forest, is unless I am just amazing and do it blindfolded, working through that will probably take the rest of our Monday, and then we can enjoy what's on the other side on Wednesday. But we'll see. We'll certainly get through the forest, I think. Especially since we started so late.
You can't beat me.
You've had Egg Bear, now try War Bear. I don't think you're ever not going to be mad about that, Grail. You have literally been complaining about that to me for months, and I kind of love it. I can tell that really must have shell-shocked you as a kid, huh? It is insane, but I'll tell you, it sets the tone, doesn't it?
Let's do it. Toe. Eagle dive. Toe. Ha. Swallow
Oh, it just occurred to me. I'm looking at the frame in OBS, and
Rising dragon strike.
like the way Eternia is rendered on the stream,
No problem.
it has a frame around it, but it has a frame around the entire thing. It's not just like something that fixes the aspect ratio. So I'll bet if I fool around in OBS a bit, I can expand it to fill the entirety of the stream. I don't want to do that midstream, but I should be able to hopefully make it a bit larger and more viewable before Wednesday. Don't look now. It's all the fighting Pokemon in one. That's right. Pharaoh is actually the prototype for all fighting characters in Tales of games and also all the fighting Pokemon. Little known fact, but it's true. Alright. And I think this is also a worthy pit stop because we can go back and talk to Keel's teacher now that we've formed a pact with Undine. Say, hey man, remember that thing that you cryptically told us to do? We went and did it. And the Greater Craymel was equally cryptic. I'm okay with that. I would rather be well stocked before we go forward. Oh, I can't picture the track that this reminds me of, but I just had a vivid sense that this forest track... You might know the track, Grail. It reminds me almost of a lo-fi version of, I think, a track from Near Gestalt and Near Replicant. With the choir in the background, of course. Bits and pieces of this track have that feeling to me. Maybe that's part of why I love the soundtrack so much. Maybe it's evoking Nier more than I have realized. Another game with just absolutely grade A music. No tomatoes, but it's something. Alright. Yeah, that's fair. Well, take a listen sometime. Tell me if you hear it. Oh, this NPC's walk is going to be the death of me. Mazet. How could I forget that name? It's so close to Musée. We did a whole bit about that. Well, did you find Undine? She agreed to help us. That's wonderful. But I never dreamed we'd end up having to fight a Greater Craymel. Did Undine say anything about the Grand Fall? No, not really. Too bad. But the very fact that she agreed to cooperate with humans suggests that disaster is surely upon us. She did seem to intimate that. In a very holier-than-thou way. Did you notice that? I didn't dwell on it, but man, the fact that Undine, who I think is typically, or even categorically represented as one of the just kind and supportive and gentle, like bountiful, life-giving spirits, was just so dismissive of humans, saying, do you think some being such as I would deign to speak with you if there weren't some important reason? Like, wow, okay, Undine, coming right out of the gate with it. And to have that as the first tonal point of introduction to the Greater Craymels, that's something. So it's true. Well, what will you do now? We intend to go to Inferia City. We have an obligation to report the matter to the king. That's a good idea. Inferia City is far east of the Forest of Temptation. Not to worry. With that map you gave us, we should have no problem finding our way. I see. Well then, have a safe journey. I don't think we have any other conversation topics with them. No. In an old school JRPG, maybe even more so than your typical Tales of game, and therefore even more so in an old school Tales of JRPG, always worth it to go back and re-explore the places you've already been. There's usually more to see and say and do there. Alright. Head east to the Forest of Temptation. Oh, interesting, Grail. Is that the new one that you were talking about? Telling you, that's one of the fun things about doing this grand study of the Tales of series that we're engaged with. I think the closer you look into and build a framework for relating to these games as a unit, the more that also becomes a framework you can pick up and take to make sense of other games and recognize points of resonance and modes of access and engagement with those games that you wouldn't otherwise have considered. That's the other thing I did while I was grinding, just for transparency. I went back to Nostos Cave to clear out the chests that I had missed, because I didn't want to deal with managing the tidal flow when we were going through it the first time. So stuff like, I think, Farah's poisoned gloves picked up as cool kit in there. But you didn't miss anything besides the chests. Another fun little small puzzle, though. You really have to not only manage the tides, but also figuring out where you need to be positioned in the dungeon at which tidal shifts in order to get access to the right paths to be able to open all the chests. Whew, this place is kind of creepy. The only way to get to Inferia City is by going through this forest, since commoners aren't allowed to board the royal ship. Getting some issues of class before reaching the capital of the world. Another track with a very different tone. Notice again the mystic, almost fairy tale naming conventions of especially the dungeons we are journeying through to pass to different points of the world. So these threshold locations, one might call them. We had Nostos Cave, which again comes from the Greek for homecoming. And now we have the Forest of Temptation. Not usual names for simply locations in a world.
Let's do it.
Grim Reaper.
Swallow dance.
Talk about a tonal shift.
Sonic Blade.
And they're really annoying because their hitbox floats right above where most of your attacks naturally land.
Is that it?
But Farah can also just punch through everything. Okay. Remember what I said about things hiding beyond your point of view? Welcome to the Forest of Temptation. Well, Grail, in their defense, had I not spent some time grinding and remembering my previous experience with the Forest of Temptation, I think they could get pretty close to instantly killing you. But hopefully we'll be in a better position this time around.
Let's do it. Ha. Swallow dance.
Spectre? I barely even know her. Alright, that's my one dad joke. Don't let me get another one. Don't give it to me. Yeah, that mental bangle or whatever it's called is just what Farah needed. It's really making her TP base much more manageable. No need to burn a melange gel yet, so we can just leave that there. Oh, or... while we're here, I guess I can just burn one on Farah. It's not a total waste. Good. I never am fond of leaving chests for later.
Let's do it. Ha. Swallow dance. Ha. Swallow dance. Ha. Swallow dance.
Ooh, that was close.
Was it, Reed? Their silly little apple shield. I saw a funny meme today complaining about how much beefier the skeletons had gotten in Shadow of the Erdtree versus the base game for Elden Ring. There's something just quintessential about a skelly enemy, isn't there? They're always going to spook you. You're always going to want to blow right through them. I wanted to see where Farah was on... Okay, she wants to keep kicking. Yeah, we can't go this way yet. Wasn't sure if we could go upstream.
Let's do it. Toe. Swallow dance. Swallow dance. Toe.
So notice already in these first few screens, I think it quickly becomes evident we have been introduced to this labyrinth, almost like a Lost Woods style labyrinth, with this directive, you need to figure out how to get to the other side, and virtually no guidance regarding how to do so. Just immediately swallowed by this misty expanse that goes off in all directions and in the least obvious ways, without even a clear means or measure of progress. But don't worry, kids, I know the clear measure of progress. I just have to find it.
Let's do it. Toe. Rising dragons.
Orc jelly. What a name for a slime enemy.
Rising Dragon Strike! Swallow Dance! Is that it?
Okay. Can we go this way? No. We can go up. Right, that's not what you want. Got field sprites in that one suspicious location. What could that be about? Ah, that's the good ending. When you're so stocked on life bottles, you can't even hold anymore.
Let's do it!
Ghouls and a Grim
Swallow
Reaper.
Dance!
Oh no. The gang's all here. I keep forgetting to ask Merity to use spread. But I'm not going to forget to ask her to use Undine, especially now that we're in a harder battle. Behold! Behold my power! That's her call out. Pretty cool, right?
Swallow Dance!
Don't let your guard down yet.
There you go. Got our first summon. First pact and our first summon in the stream. Many more to come. Alright. The deity of order. What's that all about? We have visions of a deity. Some kind of idol. Quite explicitly. And he seems to be facing in a certain direction. I'm going to let everyone know now, just so you can all give me points for being honest. I could absolutely go back through my notepad and cheat to solve this puzzle a little more quickly, but I'm going to play it by the book and solve it with you all over again. Which means we have to start by finding a particular thing, which I have not found yet.
Eagle Dive!
Demon Hammer!
Rising Dragon Strike!
Where the sphere at? Give it time. If you stick in a world for long enough, it'll start to buzz.
Wind Blade!
It looks like we won!
We'll be okay. See, this is the other good thing about my having done some grinding before. It's a pine gel, not a pineapple gel. The deity of creation. A second deity, also facing in a particular direction. Yeah, the good thing about the grinding session I had is that we can take our time with this puzzle and not worry about enemies just winnowing us down to the quick and depleting our item supply and all of that, which is a big part, as you might imagine, of what makes the Forest of Temptation
Let's do it!
so frustrating if you're not on or above level for it. Oh man, I really hope my throat wakes up restored tomorrow.
Eagle Dive! Swallow Dance! Eagle Dive! Swallow Dance!
No problem.
Reed stealing Farrah's line. No problem. Farrah, speaking of health, needs some. That's better. Okay, so we have order and creation on this side. We got one. Not a lot, but we got one. This is a barrier that we're going to want to remember.
Let's do it! Ha! Swallow Dance!
Aqua Edge!
Rising Dragon Strike!
Kerchaw.
Phew! They were tough.
Your health has been restored. Excellent. I forgot the barrier did that. We're going to come back and see those Grim Reapers. Up, up! That's not what I wanted. They unrestore your health, as you can see. But not by as much as you would fear. Which one is this? I'm sure it said when we entered the screen, but I missed it. Deity of Confusion. Okay. We have order, creation, and confusion so far.
Swallow dance. Toe, ha. Toe, toe, ha. Rising dragon strike. Here, ha.
So again, notice, even now,
Swallow dance.
I remember this being a really interesting and challenging aspect of this dungeon, and it becomes par for the course in Tales of Eternia. We are being introduced to what are clearly pieces of a puzzle when it's totally unclear, I would say totally unclear, what the overall objective of the puzzle is and what it takes for us to solve it. And it depends on you finding kind of the cipher to the puzzle before you can do anything with its constituents.
Let's do it. Toe. Ah.
So yeah, for those of you who found the puzzle-solving aspect of Tales of Arise wanting, good news. Welcome to the opposite of that.
Toe.
Ooh!
Toe.
Reed learned Swarm. I love Swarm. It's a great skill. Is the cool thing about Grim Reapers, and something that is true to their name, they drop reverse dolls. Deity of Destruction. It's called Swarm. Thank you very much. Alright, so that's 4 of them. I think there's one more, but they're really useless to us until we find the right thing to pull it all together. Gotta remember where that is.
Let's do it. Ha. Swallow dance. Ha.
Aqua edge!
Toe, ha. Swallow dance. Don't take me lightly.
We're too powerful. It's only called Swarm. I will not respond to anything but Swarm. Misty Robe. Okay. Good, good. Another way out here? No. This is just a one-to-one passageway.
Let's do it. Ha. Swallow dance.
Fireball!
Swallow dance. Ah.
Aqua edge!
Toe. Ha. 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 Toe.
Demon lightning hammer!
Ha. Ha. The end.
The end. I forgot about that post-battle line, but I love it and I deeply empathize with it. Finally, the end. Silk cloak, good. See, the treasure chests are nice in a place like this, not only because they have new kit, but also because they're like little markers letting you know when you found a new place. Here we go, thank God. This is the cipher. The path will be revealed when the opposing statues face each other. What does it mean? Why don't we try moving the statues? Won't move. How do we move it? Now, shrewd gamers will have already figured it out at this point. The statue appears to be the great deity. The path will be revealed when the opposing statues face each other. So we've got to make the statues face each other. Oh, yes, my bad. So we actually saw all 4 of the statues. The other is just the godhead, as it were, pointing the way and explaining the puzzle, which is also interesting, also worth keeping in mind, but for now we're going to focus on solving the puzzle. And I don't consider this cheating, and those of you who are regulars to the stream know that I do this in most cases. I'm going to take photographs reminding myself of the positioning here just so that we don't have to go back to it every time we try to solve a piece of the puzzle, because then we will be here all night. So this one is the deity of confusion. This one is the deity of destruction. This one is the deity of order. Which means the last one is creation, if I'm not losing my mind. Yep, there you go. Fabulous! And now we just get to retrace our steps and find those 4 statues again, which should not be as bad. I feel like they would let him into the sword protagonist party, but only on like Alt Hero Fridays, like special bonus theme days.
Let's do it.
But I love him, as I think you were saying you also do, Grail. I think he could hold his own against pretty much any of them, as some post-game content suggests. And I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. The sure sign of a good joke, Grail. You had to preemptively explain it. No, but it was a good joke. I appreciated that. Let's cook. Let's cook today. I have to keep reminding myself I can save whenever I want. Don't have to worry about save circles. And I should be saving. Cool. Alright. Now we go back and find the other statues and make them face each other. And the nice thing is, because that room we just found was just a cipher, we don't even need to go back there afterwards. It's just showing us which statues we need to orient in which way. And then once we've done that with the actual source statues, the way will open.
Swallow dance. Swallow dance.
It's the kind of puzzle, and I hope some of you are old enough. Well, I know Pottery is if he's still watching, but I hope more people than us are old enough to remember this. It puts me in mind of my oldest days of gaming on like the GameCube and that era, which isn't even as old as some, when I would actually use paper and pencil to write down and keep track of puzzles. Because if I'd been playing this back in the day, that would have been in the days before smartphones, when it wouldn't have been as easy to just, pick up a rectangle and take pictures of the puzzle. So I vividly and fondly remember, especially for whatever reason, memories of playing through the Wind Waker for the first time, and some of its puzzles, many of its puzzles actually. I think I maybe did this for Tales of Symphonia too, actually, as I'm recalling it. But I would write down just reams and reams of notes, trying to make sense of everything and remember the details that I would need for like later puzzles and rooms and dungeons and stuff like that. It's a certain magic to that kind of gaming that I don't really think we get nowadays. It's a bit of a lost era. Oh, Grail, it's like you know me. Well, that is also a tried and true tactic, though, Grail. And God knows I availed myself of that one as much as I did of reasoned note-taking. But I'll tell you, there is something deeply satisfying to actually writing down and working through like the logic puzzles of old school games from beginning to end. I always felt really accomplished when I did that. And I don't really feel that same sense of accomplishment from a lot of modern games. I feel many other senses of accomplishment, but usually not that. We might have to go back further. That might be the easiest way to get back on the path. I'm going to go back to the start. Because we picked up all of the 4 statues pretty quickly, just diving off to the right the first time.
Swallow dance.
I think I kind of accidentally trapped myself in a loop there.
Swallow dance. Phew, they were tough.
I think this is the beginning. Yep, okay. And we bore right away. Which takes us over here. Oh no, this was a dead end, okay. It's mostly just right and then a loop up if memory serves.
Let's do it.
And the path to the waterfront, which we'll need to remember, is also down on this side. We don't need that right now.
Rising dragon strike.
Farrah's kick still not leveled up? I've been watching for that. Nope. Gotta get that girl kicking more. She doesn't have a lot of kick skills right now, that's the issue. It's mostly just swallow dance and then her basics. This is the river, I think. Yep, okay. This, I think, is nothing. Yeah, go up here.
Let's do it. Ha! Swallow dance. Ah! Ah! Toe! Toe! Ah! Ah! Toe! Ah! Eagle! Swallow dance. Ha! Okay.
Okay, so also worth noting, her skills that can chain out to other skills that do not further chain. So even though Swallow Dance is not a skill that it wants you to chain off of, since Eagle Dive is a skill that you can use Eagle Dive and then go right into Swallow Dance after that, for example. We're learning Farrah. It's a worthy enterprise. Okay. I recognize this is probably an ass backwards way of doing it, but it's gonna help me just follow the muscle memory.
Let's do it.
Relocate all of them.
Swallow dance. Ha! Ha! Swallow dance. Ha! Toe! Ha! Toe! Swallow dance.
The translations of his arts, you mean?
No problem.
Telling you, I think we should really keep that in view as something to talk about as we go on, because between nomenclature of things like Craymels and the different structure of the worlds and the different naming of the arts, I think there is something special to how they were representing a different world with different names in a game and a story that's so concerned with the means of expression and what it is to communicate through language. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the more we can make sense of why the words might be different but the attack's the same, the better handle we'll get on that. Of course, the one we start with, the Deity of Order, is one of the ones that's actually in the right place. So good news, we don't have to move that one at all. The Deity of Creation we do have to move. That one we need to move, so it's facing left. Okay.
Let's do it. Ha! Swallow dance. Toe! Toe! Ha! Toe! Swallow dance. Toe! Toe! Swallow dance.
No problem.
All right, 2 out of 4. Halfway there. People might think it's more fun with the later games that have more detailed graphics, but I'll tell you, to me, there's something really magical and cool about the way the earlier games represent the different swords and aesthetics of characters. Like if you look at Reed's weapons especially, look at that sword he has right now. That's such a cool rendering of a particular weapon. And if you keep an eye on them throughout the course of the game, you'll see that some of them, like, they can put so much character into just a few pixels. I really love that. You can see, again, when they were working with far fewer tech resources, how they were already planting the seeds for the level and kind of characterization and customization that would only continue to elaborate upon itself in later iterations of the series. This, I think, is the membrane, which we can use to heal. Very good. So you know it's a long and winding dungeon when they have a healing mechanic built into it in a game that usually doesn't afford you that. Granted, these dungeons do usually give you an opportunity to camp. I don't think this one has a campsite.
Okay!
When you say emote, what do you mean, Grail? Just like they express their emotions in general? Or do you have something else in mind? Or do you mean like the actual sprites, like they represent emotions in a way that the Symphonia sprites are a little more reserved? This is confusion, right? I remember because I did this exact same thing last time. I didn't process it when I entered the screen. Okay. Confusion wants to be facing to our right. Good. That was it. Good, because the last one was in place already. The forest path is opened. Excellent. All right. Yeah, it is interesting. That's one of those, because I think I share that intuition just with the sprites. And again, Pottery, I don't know if you're still here. I feel like he might know more about this, but I do have the sense that maybe it was one of those things where as they were making the big quantum leap from 2D to 3D, they kind of, like, more of their resources were focused just on 3D representation, and so they let more of those finer details of things like facial expression go, which was then why, like we talked about before, by the time they got to Tales of the Abyss, they were really marketing it, saying, hey, look, we got the facial expressions back. Look at everything that they can show with their face, which was really cool. But yeah, I was noticing that because I think, excuse me, God, my throat. I think based on where we ultimately placed it in the timeline, Tales of Destiny 2 was more or less contemporaneous with the first 3D games that they were doing, but they still did it in a 2D sprite-based way. Ooh, Queeky has something to show us, rather than doing something 3D. And so I found myself looking at the box and thinking, well, that's interesting. Why would they have made that choice? And Tales of Hearts, like the first Tales of Hearts for the 3DS, that was also like sprite-based rather than 3D graphics. And I think, like we've been talking about with things like the background here and just how it represents, it's in no way just a simple matter of increasing quality and progress to go from 2D to 3D. That's not the right distinction to draw. They just are different means of expression. And oftentimes, I think, based on what it is that you want to say, something that is beautifully rendered in 2D might be better able to capture that than a 3D world. Oh, what an interesting observation by some YouTube voice. That's one of the things that I remember it for, Link's expressions in particular, but a lot of the expressions on the characters there have quite a bit of range. And that was back, God, what year was that? Was that 98? So, yeah, even prior to this by 2 years. Queeky, come back. That's interesting, too. Again, keep an eye on how language is syntactically represented and then how it's also voiced when characters are using it. Because, I mean, Merity, she's from Celestia with Queeky. She knows how he says his name. She says it the same way. But when we're actually reading what Merity is saying through this intermediary of the Or's earring, it's represented as Quickie, the way that Reed says it, which I think is pretty transparently reductive and inaccurate. So again, interesting that we're getting that layer of representation rather than what it might seem more natural and intuitive that Merity herself would be expressing and cognitively representing through that name.
Let's do it! Ha! Swallow dance! Ha! To! Ha! To! Rising dragon strike! Ah! 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 Eagle dive! Ah! Ha!
Oh, there you go.
Fireball!
Yeah, thanks for that background, Grail, so that makes perfect sense. It was the preferred artistic milieu for a given team within the Tales studio. And isn't that so cool? Like, I love discussing little tidbits about the teams with you because that adds so much to my understanding and appreciation of the series that I wouldn't have known otherwise. This idea that actually part of what distinguishes the teams is that something like their artistic style and what form of representation they're comfortable with playing in can be as different as one team focusing on 3D stuff and one on 2D representation. Quickie! We can go further from here. Very good. All right. Crossing the river. The air here is so pure. Second time they mentioned that. First time was at Undine's stream. Looks like a rest area. Let's say we rest here. The place looks to be safe. Oh, it does also have a camp. I'd forgotten this.
Say, Meredy, if we somehow gather all the Greater Craymels, what do we do then?
Utiusu, Irudinai duya, Dunwa Dundu.
Slipping back into Melnyx.
Return to Celestia.
To Celestia? How?
I do not know.
It sounds as though that may be a bigger hurdle than gathering all the Greater Craymels.
If that's true, how did you come to Inferia? The two worlds have been out of contact for 2,000 years.
I came on a Craymel craft. It can fly in the sky.
Spaceship girl.
That's nonsense. That kind of technology is impossible.
Keel shooting from the hip as ever. If it's something he doesn't understand and is not theorized about in school, it is nonsense and not possible.
Maybe you've never heard of it, but we saw it with our own eyes.
And immediately pivot with Reed into the difference between theory and praxis.
It was flying, but then it crashed.
It is true.
Then take me to the crash site. I can't believe it unless I see it myself.
Well, Keel, I really want to show it to you, but...
For an object to levitate, does it use reciprocal Craymel placement, or maybe artificial globule distortion? No, that would create a problem with the conservatism principle.
Keel, I don't want to disappoint you, but...
And notice, we got a few more terms there, but something like the conservatism principle, which I think was the only strictly new one, is probably just something like the conservation of energy, that energy can be neither created nor destroyed, which is a principle worth bearing in mind as we go on here. Again, I don't think that's a random jargon. I think it pertains. And then, he said something about complementary Craymels balancing each other, which is also important, but I think that was the other new thing. And yeah, to your point on Grace's being the first 3D attempt of the team Grail, it's interesting because I hadn't known that either. And it kind of does, it's almost one of those things that helps me explain something I hadn't processed before, because I think we talked about this a little during Grace's, but don't the models and just like the way the visuals are represented like feel a little different than the other 3D games? Like, I think we talked about it as a bit more almost shaded and emotive than what you get in some of the other 3D games, which feels to me pretty continuous with the way sprites are represented in these other ones. And also just a nice marriage of form and function with the aspect of visual representation, and then an artist like Mitsumi Inomata and the way that she brings life to characters visually.
Well, let me first see the craft. After I measure the Craymel density in the area, I should be able to derive a hypothesis. Well, where's it at?
We have horrible news.
Impossible. Craymel craft explode into many, many pieces.
No.
It's true. Reed and I were there.
It was pretty scary.
It can't be destroyed. A flying machine? A revolutionary technology?
Well, I'm sure we'll find something to get us to Celestia. Yeah, no problem.
No problem. Farah, shoot some of your optimism into my veins. Quickie, cool. The air feels unsafe. Oh, not so pure anymore, huh? This forest is where all the lost souls gather. If you're not careful, spirits hungry for a body could drain your life dry. Dude, don't scare us like that. No problem. Monster, pirate, whatever. I'll take them all on. So notice, it seems like this is a world with spirits, but not quite summoned spirits. More like wandering spirits of the deceased. Found another reverse... Wow, excuse me. Reverse stall. Why can't I speak? Pirates? I'm sure that won't come up again. What? No. What? No. Lemon gel. Getting all the fancy gels now.
Let's do it.
This is one of those things that's cool to me now playing the game for the second time through, because I had not processed the first time I played it how early and how frequently the characters bring up this idea of the value and importance of seeing something with your own eyes in order to validate and understand it. And I'm trying to call it out because it is so frequent, and we will do well to pay attention to that, because it's going to keep coming up in pretty interesting ways.
Rising Dragon Strike. Go, go.
So another field enemy who is eager to fight with us, if you missed that.
That wasn't so tough.
A pretty tough one at that. We got some kind of reaction after fighting it. And we got a charm bottle. Which, yes, we can use it to increase, use it to get a discount rather in shops, which is excellent. Oh, come on. That's interesting, though. I didn't process that the last time it happened, but it seems like another interesting consequence of failing to cook a meal is that it has some likelihood of generating elemental shards, which can then be used to advance the levels of Greater Craymels. Interesting. I wonder what the explanation for that is. Like, you fail to cook so extremely that it just spits out a particular element in its purest, raw form. Well, I'm happy with the consequence, however it might have come about. Yes, but terrible in a useful way. Oh, and we got a water crystal. That's useful for us right now. Because we can use it to advance Undine. Also, they were actually saying Farah's cooking was terrible. My cooking is also terrible, but it's different.
Rising Dragon Strike.
I need to get back into cooking. I've fallen into this terrible habit of only cooking like 3 rotating meals for myself.
Okay.
Which is fine, I'm a creature of habit, but I really need to add some new things back into the rotation. Been craving a nice steak, but it feels like work when I haven't cooked one in a while. Which is silly, because it's not even that much work. Orange gel. Another one of those enemies.
Go. Swallow dance. Ha. Swallow dance.
If you think there's something important about these enemies and that we need to find them, you're right. I'm a little concerned because I thought there might be something in this area that we had to do before our fighting them counted as actually defeating them, but I think based on the noise that that first one made, we're okay.
We did it.
And this will count. Yeah, that seems good. So notice also, we are back in the position of having to solve a puzzle before being aware of what the puzzle is. And notice that this is a stacked dungeon because it put you through one very opaque and convoluted puzzle, only to then, upon the completion of that puzzle, immediately present you with a second one.
Aqua Edge! That should do.
Oh, I know, and I'm the worst for that. Once you fall into a habit of that, you can really just push yourself into a pit without a lot of effort. And those systems are awful because they don't just make it convenient, they really incentivize you in sinister ways to use and overuse them. And by the way, I say this as someone who totally caved in and went on a DoorDash binge last night. So there you go. You stopped and I like absorbed and picked up your DoorDash urge by proxy. So it all worked out. No, but it can be fun to enjoy every now and then, but yeah, it's too tempting. Speaking of the forest of temptation, right? Too tempting to make it your default. That just never works out well.
Demon Lightning Hammer! Fireball! Wind Blade! Fireball! Demon Lightning Hammer! How was that?
Every time I'm about to heal with Farah, Reed just goes all gung-ho and ends the battle. Making me use my gels, dude. Yeah, I usually just try to go cold turkey, and I'm decent at that, but yeah, unless you set really hard restrictions on yourself, it's such a slippery slope.
Swallow dance.
Aqua Edge!
I'm gonna choose to act as if I didn't see your last comment because I want to refrain from saying too much. We're just getting started with this game. That's all I'm gonna say about that.
Alright.
Plenty of Reed left to see. Plenty of Reed left to explain and elaborate upon. Okay, I think that was 3, right? I think just like our deity friends, we want to take down 5.
Swallow dance.
Aqua Edge!
Undine!
Goodbye! Give up, skeleton!
Okay.
And she heals us, if you didn't notice that. The old 1-2 magical water of life. Yeah, I think this is a one-way room. Oh, come on, dude. Yes, okay. 3 down, and that did count, but 2 to go, if you didn't draw that inference. You found the final message of an adventurer. Notice, if you ever find yourself saying, oh, only the later or specific Tales titles are dark, we are 2 for 2 in Threshold Dungeons and Dead Bodies of Travelers Found. 1 merchant and 1 adventurer. So, I have gotten on the soapbox about Fantasia before because it starts out with multiple portraits of cities getting massacred right away. But there's plenty of death in Eternia also. Some pretty important images of death. So the final message of an adventurer. Defeat the 5 beasts, the source of the curse. Only then. Rest in peace, my humble adventurer. Let's go find those other 2 curse bearers. Oh, come on. Stop doing that. Stop doing that. It didn't take as much of our health as I feared. It always just looks and sounds worse than it is. Bro! Come on.
Let's do it. Swallow dance.
Wind Blade!
Is her kick level still not gone up?
Super light blade.
I feel like I've been working on that all stream. Farah, what's going on with your feet? Yeah. Just taking a while, I guess. Perfect. Save often, my friends.
Rising Dragon Strike!
Aqua Egg. Demon Lightning Hammer.
That's weird, we lost the shortcut for spread for some reason.
Wind Blade. Fireball. Don't let your guard down.
Alright, one more. Ooh, man. I don't want to jinx myself or be too premature about this, but I feel like muscle memory is going to help us a decent amount in working through these Eternia puzzles. 'Cause I definitely puzzled over my fair share of them the first time around.
Let's do it!
I'm telling you, I am taking feedback actively as to why this might be the case, but I really feel it's so much easier and more enticing for me to take advantage of a lot of the gameplay systems in Eternia versus the other games. And I'm trying to spin out some views as to why that might be the case, but I don't really have any firm sentiments so far. But yeah, stick with the study and you'll see I think that's the rule rather than the exception.
Eagle dive!
Wind Blade.
And it really is also like at least a small part of it is a practical concern, because like I hinted at, there is some post-game content. You simply need very powerful Greater Craymel levels to be able to get through. And frankly, I didn't do a good enough job the first time around to be able to do that. So I'd like to give us a fighting chance at it this time if we're able. We'll see how that goes. Well, that seems like a good place to start, though, Grail, because honestly, I wasn't even thinking of it as something that would be a name with mythical origins, but yeah, the idea of it as a demon from Christian and pagan theology, that strikes me as tonally and maybe also traditionally right for Tales of Eternia. That's why I said just a feeling. I would like to be able to explain it, but yeah, I'll be the first to say right now I'm not sure what the shape of that is. It might be as simple as I am now working through my first replay of this, and so I'm trying to make sense of it from like a prepared perspective, whereas with the Xillia games I was trying to just absorb it all for the first time. And as I've said, it can be harder for me to really lean into and take advantage of all the systems in that kind of scenario. Yeah, well, and theorized by whom and to what end. I mean, it's, without other context, that word is kind of hopelessly ambiguous, like a lot of our favorite words. Or any word, you might say. Well, we can do some more joint research after this, because now you've piqued my curiosity about it. Is that the way out? I know we want to find our way back to the right to get back to that adventurer. I don't think that's the way. Oh no, we have to go down one more and then right. That's it. Yep. past these WODs.
Let's do it. Ha.
Spread.
Ha. Swallow dance. To. To. Ha.
Spread.
Rising dragon strike.
Yeah, the thing that I remember I ultimately had to offset just for my own viewing pleasure, and so I'm sure it'll end up being the case even more so now that we're streaming it, is when you get really into the pattern of shortcutting the relevant Craymel arts for building up your spirits, the battles can get very boring because it's just the same art over and over again, or the same set of arts. So at some point I'll try to tone that down just to make everything feel a little less monotonous. But it's a cool art, like Pottery pointed out, so not the worst one to spam if you're going to spam one. So there you go, a hidden path through the Lost Woods. Through the Lost Forest of Temptation. And we're out. Alright. I think, based on the time and the checkpoint we've reached, it'll be better to start fresh on Wednesday than to introduce us to Inferia City just to then have to pause things pretty quickly.
Let's do it.
So I'll walk us over to the city and then we can
Swallow
wrap up.
dance.
But yeah, this remains an interesting and open question for Aaron, less on the matter of like analysis of the game's fictional content and more in terms of just how does Aaron's brain work? Why did these systems resonate and these other ones don't? So I am curious about that, especially for those like Pottery and Grail who have been with us for multiple studies. Like, if you get a sense of why Aaron is glomming onto these and he hasn't in the past, I'm interested in that. All right, my friends. Well, it was a briefer stream, all things considered, but again, I'm going to thank you for your grace in understanding that, and I do think it was more or less a one-off as I get my living situation for the next year sorted, and things will settle into a more regular cadence for at least a little bit. But a pretty fruitful and rewarding one all the same, I would say. We met our first Greater Craymel. We saw her, in fact, in 2 manifestations in this collection of water droplets, all of these water Craymels, and then coalesced, coagulated, if you like, into this singular, more recognizably Undine form in the battle against her, and in fact got her to form a pact with the group, as esoterically and cryptically as Mazet suggested the group ought to go and do so in the first place. And we learned some interesting things just from what she was willing to say and not say. Why wasn't she more open about the nature of the Grand Fall? What does it mean for there to be these primary Craymels of Inferia, and also to be called to seek the aid of all the Greater Craymels? And what awaits us in Inferia City? And what will we learn from thinking more about the interface between theorizing about this world from the armchair, as Keel is so wont to do, versus seeing and experiencing it with our own eyes, and not just choosing one or the other, but navigating back and forth between the two. All right, well, we are on our way. We're getting to know and nurture the first Greater Craymel, hopefully with a path to some fire and wind and light ones along the way. Certainly discovering probably already more about the world than the academics holed up in Minchi have in the university's history, which probably also has something to say about this world and what the story is saying about the nature of knowledge and experience. Yeah, thank you, Grail. It was fun for me too. I think we're going to continue to have a romp in Tales of Eternia, and all the more so once the schedule settles down. So there you go. It will be the first full week of the Tales of Eternia streams, even though this one was a little wonkier. The next 2 ought not to be. They should be more regular. So Wednesday, Friday, regular time, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm excited to see you back here. You might recall, if you watched the kickoff, a lot of the fun with Minchi was just exploring the city and learning a lot about the world and culture through research and talking with NPCs and seeing all of these little optional conversations. Inferia City is very much like that. And indeed, I'd go so far as to say that most of what it means to navigate and understand cities and cultures within Tales of Eternia is structured like that, in a way that is also foundational, yet interestingly distinct from the later games in the series, and maybe even those games that came before it. Eternia is just so wonderfully singular. So we're going to have a lot of fun in Inferia City, meet some more memorable characters, some of whom will be with us for quite a while, and hopefully find the path or some next direction pointing us towards a Greater Craymel and some greater understanding of what the heck this Grand Fall is and why it is that we're up to this quest that we're on, beyond just the optimistic but somewhat idle hope of Farah's that they might become heroes. Not that that should be discounted too much because it's so pure and wonderful, but it's a Tales of game, right? There's got to be a little more to it than that. And I have more than a hunch that there will be. All right. Gratitude from me. Gratitude from the small furry one who also appreciates the grace that you gave her dad in figuring out our joint living situation on this evening. And cheers to us all aspiring to be as content as this little puppy is on her perch on a Monday evening. All right, my friends. Well, thank you so much for a really great way to start the week. Yes, thank you, Pottery. Thank you, Grail. Hope to see you back on Wednesday. Join the Discord if you want to engage with more of these conversations and with the supplemental analyses and conversations that I'm putting out in coordination with the stream. And look for more With a Terrible Fate content coming real soon, including some new special guest appearances, which should be really fun. Until then, game well, think well, be good to yourselves and each other, and enjoy another week of all your endeavors, whatever they may be, but I hope you find and create some great value in them. Until next time then, my friends, this has been Tales of Praxis. I've been your host, Aaron Suduko. Go to withaterriblefate.com if you need any more game analysis, and we'll see you on Wednesday. Cheers, friendos.